Hello, this is Molly Arthur with EcoBirth, Women for Earth and Birth, welcoming you to conversations with women of the collective matrix. And matrix is Latin for womb. We women know about wombs. So welcome to the conversations, welcome to the women, and welcome to a world of care and compassion. Amen.
I want to introduce Sheila Spremulli, a good friend of mine. She's recently retired doula, working to support women in their birthing. She studied at Goddard College in Vermont, got a BA in Health Arts and Science. Her thesis was Living Embryo-Adult Performance, LEAP, a heuristic exploration of crisis and midlife and midshift, 2012. She supports midlife psychospiritual development using the humanities, storytelling, dance, poetry, ecofeminism.
This came out because at the time that the idea occurred to me, I was sitting in meditation and it felt as if I was being compressed globally all around. And because of my birthing background, I said, this feels like being inside of a womb during a contraction. Well, I was also studying biodynamic craniosacral therapy, and it was unsettling having this experience because it was compressive. And I thought, is this a panic attack? Because I was also in midlife doing hot flashes. So I thought, I'm going to use my biodynamic craniosacral training. I'm going to sit in this process, and I'm going to both participate in it and observe it. And I know that by staying at the edge of it and not flipping out with it, it will resolve itself. And that's what it did. Just about that time, I was introduced to van der Waals' work through my biodynamic craniosacral training, and I thought, I'm rebirthing myself here. My job isn't so much to be a doula to literal childbirthing women, but to rebirth myself into the second half of my life. So it's the same thing that the universe does. It expands and contracts, and it expands and contracts. Our body oscillates, vibrates, and responds to what I call, what I learned about. Part of what was happening at Goddard was I was being taught to do wild research. In other words, follow what you're interested in. I would land on landscapes. I had no idea where I was, but one of the things that I came upon was phenomenology. And phenomenology, there's a philosophy of phenomenology, and then there's Goethe, whose phenomenology van der Waal uses, and he is looking at what the growth gestures and the movement of the embryo. And by interpreting what the embryo is doing in those two things, its shape-taking and its growth movements, he maintains that the essence of spiritual unfoldment is being expressed in the embryo.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So again, it's the spirituality, and this phenomenology, the philosophy, led me to something called ontopoiesis. Onto being, and poiesis making firstness. So I started to appreciate even more van der Waals' suggestion that what we do in our shape-taking and in our growth gestures, we recapitulate physiologically and then psychospiritually for the rest of our lives.
Oh my goodness. So explain to me about the growth of the embryo, because this was really what interested me so much in our first conversations.
Yeah.
About the heart.
The development of the heart happens between the second and third week after conception. There are 4 crises which this is van der Waals' work, which
Yes.
which he delineates as critical. If you don't survive those crises, you wouldn't be here. So we all did it, and we did it before we even had a functioning cognitive brain. So it is not it is inherent wisdom in our bodies. So what we do is the first is conception, the second is implantation, the third is cardiogenesis, and the fourth is turning yourself inside out and forming a body. And the cardiogenesis, I think, is what was so important, or what snagged you. Maybe you want to say something about why it snagged you.
Oh, just what I have had such a journey about softening my heart and understanding how to expose and show my care and compassion in the world, and the heart represented that. Mm-hmm. So then Sheila was talking to me about the physicality of the heart that was connected to the spirituality of the heart. So yeah, do tell us how the heart is formed.
Blood, he says, is the first organ.
Oh my gosh.
Before there is a heart, the blood arises, and the blood cells themselves pulse. There's no heart. So the pulse is like, they're pulsing.
They're pulsing.
And
just on their own.
On their own. And this is just fluid flow now. Fluid flow. Excuse me. Subsequently, as in the process of the heart coming and being invited to arise, these, and this is very simplistic, this is my understanding again, these cells will signal to each other, and they start to collect and form blood islands. Out of this process of coming together, vessel linings start to form, and the current then goes through these vessel linings, and because of their being constrained at a certain part of the embryonic disc where the ectoderm and endoderm and mesoderm are coming together, opposite from where they're connected in the connection stalk, they can't go any farther. And where they start, where these two currents of coming up on either side of the embryonic disc start being confluent and converging, is where the heart muscle starts to arise.
Well, the resistance, you were saying, it's the resistance. You can't. It doesn't get created unless you actually have resistance.
That's right. Nothing. This is Eric Blechschmidt, and van der Waals quotes him. There is no development without resistance.
Oh my God.
And that's true on a morphological level, and a physiological level, and a psychospiritual level.
Yeah. So for me, in the spiritual journey, understanding the challenges and the sufferings and the resistance of our lives, that it's essential for us to grow a heart.
Exactly. And to recapitulate that, at midlife means, how am I going to love in the world? How am I going to allow myself to be loved in the world?
Oh my gosh.
And how do I resist being loved, or reject being loved in the ways that I don't want to be loved? I mean, it's really a redefining of how you're going to be impassioned in the world.
Extraordinary to me as well was that the heart was exposed. It's not even
on the outside of the body.
Right.
Absolutely, and it's right here up at the neck, and it is pulsing, and the limb buds, as they grow. I mean, this doesn't all happen in the third week, but as you're growing, the heart is pulsing so hard that it's making the whole embryo reverberate, and it's still on the outside. We haven't gotten to the fourth crisis of turning inside out, where the brain comes up from a growth gesture, and the heart descends into the body cavity, and you, from side to side, from top to bottom, you close yourself around your umbilical cord.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, the exposed heart, the heart that can be so vulnerable, is so spiritually provocative.
Yep.
And then we figure out, I guess, who we are, how we want to grow, how we want to develop in some way. I'm just using this as a metaphor.
Yep.
Is that the heart then becomes encompassed when we better figure out how we receive love, how we give love. That's my metaphor about this growth.
That's actually a good metaphor, Molly, I think, because encompassed has to do with the fourth crisis. Your heart becomes inside of your body then, and by turning inside out and rotating 180 degrees, that's what the embryo does. That's why at midlife, when you've got a heart cardiogenesis recapitulation, and you go to the fourth crisis of, I mean, you don't even realize, you might not even recognize who you are or how you've become, because you've done this turning yourself inside out. It's really a reframing of your worldview, almost.
Gosh, but you're exposing your heart.
You're exposing your heart, but let me tell you one other thing about the heart crisis. This, again, happens between the second and third week after conception. Van der Waals says that it's possible, and he's springboarding off of Rudolf Steiner's work, it's possible that the soul may be hovering around the body taking form. And it isn't until the third week that Van der Waals says it is your heart that brings you here.
Oh my gosh.
Perhaps that is when the soul comes in, because still in the second week after conception, you can twin. You can become a twin.
Oh my gosh.
There are many more twins than people realize that there are, but they don't survive. And after your heart comes in, if you become a twin, it's pathological. You're Siamese. So your heart individuates you.
Oh my goodness.
You also become an individual with your heart, and you become ensouled with your heart. I don't know. This is all philosophy. Who knows? But it's a nice way to think. Yep.
It's a reality, but it's both metaphor and physiology, which is so provocative.
And it may help you make meaning out of what's going on in your midlife process.
Right. Yeah. So within the midlife crisis, we're exposing our hearts. We don't know who we are. What we've lived through, we're not sure it was worth it. Whether. I certainly went through that. All of a sudden, I'm looking around my life and saying, "This is what I worked for." Wow. And then it's trauma in some way, and to realize that there is a metaphor for this is so beautiful.
And
for us.
It is actually more than a metaphor, because by the way Van der Waals interprets this, I was able to apply it to midlife. He doesn't necessarily apply it to midlife. That's mine. But
so tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, he did read the thesis. He did read my thesis. He said it was good stuff.
Nice.
Apparently I've got his support on this, and he is interested in how it's being applied, how his work is being applied, because that's what he says. This is a repeat of what we do as embryo.
You're working now with a group of women.
Yes.
And the presumption being that you're using this as a model for your work with them.
Right.
In some way. So tell us a little bit about how that works in a group or individually with the psychospiritual. I mean, so I'm interested in what psychospiritual means as well.
Yeah. I think it's important to say that the audience that would be receptive to something like living embryo adult performance consciously at midlife would be a spiritual seeker. And, I explained to them about how the different opposites, polarities between the egg and the sperm, everything that the egg is, the sperm isn't characteristic-wise, and that there are hours of negotiation. It is that there's no penetration. It is that the thousands of eggs work, thousands of sperm work on the zona pellucida, and they soften. There's a biochemical exchange or communication. Will there be a conception? Won't there be a conception is the question. And if there's going to be a conception, van der Waal says that there's something that Goethe calls Steigerung, or a elevation of physical biology. And van der Waal maintains that there's a vertical conception. There's some vertical or third force that comes down that supports the potential for a conception. And then the zona pellucida opens, admits one sperm, and closes again. So sovereignty is there. I knew sovereignty was going to have to be part of this developmental trajectory for me. And tension from this ontopoetic impulse to make firstness, to become, to evolve as a human, as a cosmos, it involves tension. There's metabolic force fields that actually pull and shear and compress and help the body take its form. So I knew that was going to be happening, but I wanted to be done consciously and in sovereignty.
Beautiful.
And,
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So within a group, within the real world, then
within
how
the
does
real world, where I'm looking at this group as a living organism. Through the self-organization, I suggested that maybe we start reading a book that I had begun, and it's Cynthia Virgil's The Holy Trinity, the Law of Three. Because, like I said, this Law of Three, this Steigerung that comes, this third force that most people are blind to. This is third force is what is the term that comes out of Gurdjieff's work. So what Cynthia Virgil, who is a contemporary mystic and an Episcopalian priest, she's taken her work that she's done with Gurdjieff, years and years and years and years of work with Gurdjieff, and she's applying the Law of Three, saying that the Trinity is not the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're forces, affirming, denying, and neutralizing forces. So that's what we're studying right now in this group. Molly, we only have to look at the embryology. We don't have to say that it's an outside force. We just know that, for example, we talked about cardiogenesis most recently, and I showed them van der Waals ectoderm and endodermal and the two-layer disc, and how the third arises in the middle. From where? From where? So there's a third force that comes again there.
But someone is interpreting that as the soul.
I don't know. I mean, this is what is so beautiful about this group, because we're sort of like tapping blindly, but we take pauses. This is out of my pre and perinatal educator certification course, which I'm doing right now through APA, Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. We know from Ray Castellino's work and William Emerson's work, for example, that trauma happens when things move too fast. Anybody has the right to call for a pause. And we start each session with a 20 minutes of centering prayer. Mm-hmm. So we're starting in a field that is supportive. We're making brief eye contact with each other. We're listening with the quality of attention that a doula brings to a birth. I said to, like Meister Eckhart said, We are all meant to be mothers of God because God is always needing to be born. We're midwifing each other in this group.
And what came to me was my journey with the religious of the Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
And the Sacred Heart being, of course, a devotional symbol of God or Jesus' love for us. But it's so extraordinary for me to see that, of course, the heart is exposed. It's outside of the body. It has a wound. It has an unhealed wound. It has an open wound, a piercing.
Mm.
And you know, and the discussion about spiritual growth around the Sacred Heart is frequently, from the wound is where you are healed. From the wound is where you find your vocation and your mission in life. And the heart has to be exposed in order to get this wound.
Well, exposed in the sense of, in an anatomical sense would be pathology, but exposed in the sense that you're self-understanding and that you're trying to be transparent and you're showing up consciously. That's exposing the wound. Interesting. Yeah. Because you are birthing from the heart. You're not using the brain so much anymore to figure things out. It's the heart intelligence that's directing.
Heart intelligence.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's provocative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you say about heart intelligence?
Well, there is a brain in the heart.
Oh my.
Yeah, and the reason why I love the mother-child dyad, there's so much resilience there. There's so much wisdom there, and everything is relational. Even after, you and I are relational. All growth is relational. Even if it provides you resistance, it still is causing you to perform yourself against this resistance in a generative way, not in an oppositional way. But a child in utero will work for its mother's survival, and it will actually the heart sends more information to the brain than it gets from the brain. So the heart is quite directive in our surviving and our thriving.
Oh my goodness, I had no idea, because with the Sacred Heart, a lot of the piercing is representative of the suffering and the comfort available to all of us that Jesus or Christ understands suffering and is our comfort in that. I think that's what's representative of the open wound.
And Richard Rohr, the Center for Action and Contemplation in New Mexico, says that it's the wound that starts us on our journey. Interestingly, I want to just tie in this idea of wound, which is the Vesica Piscis shape. At conception, or at ovulation, I should say, the fingers at the end of the fallopian tube tap literally with the woman's heartbeat on the ovary, and where it taps, the wound opens on the ovary, and the Graafian follicle, the ripened ovum, is released out of that.
Oh,
so we literally are coming through this same Vesica Piscis, where the head crowns and the labia. If you're at a birth, you'll see that. It's a beautiful round head that's coming through the Vesica Piscis shape. When you see the assumption, Christ ascended, you'll see them in a Vesica Piscis shape, or the Assumption of Mary, same thing. So it is through the wound that we come in.
Oh my goodness, that is just so lovely. It's very moving.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to kind of see, let's see, like that.
It is more almond shaped. The mandala is The mandala is round, and the Vesca Pisces is the mandorla. It's almond-shaped.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, and I love your talk about the mother-baby dyad, and I have really resonate with the idea of mother-baby as one unit, as representative or a reality of the relationship between the two that is it's immutable. Yeah, we only have one mother. We're only born from one mother. So this whole heart thing ties into the growth and our future life, and it obviously ties back to birth as well.
This is the pre and perinatal aspect of this too, which even listening to this can be activating, Molly. That this can be activating, even talking about it, because it's an early imprint in our cells.
Oh my gosh.
The connection to the mother, and depending on what that connection was or what was going on in the womb of spirit, the larger womb of spirit, the culture, the society, the immediate environment of your mother, that's how smart that prenate is. It knows it's got to survive in whatever world the mother is living in. So there could be baselines of functioning set in the embryonic period, that will have a lifelong legacy for that person. That comes out of Origins, how the 9 months before birth shape the rest of our lives, by A.M. Paul of 2010.
And it can be passed on, I understand.
Yes, transgenerational stuff, absolutely.
Epigenetics, the new science that has come up. So, you know, it matters. It makes me then wonder, if I was an egg in my mother's body 100 years ago, you know, I know there are environmental influences on that egg and on my mother, but, you know, now I want to think about, okay, how might that relate to the physiology that you're talking about?
Every egg that you had, of which you had any potential for creating a child, was in your body when you were in your mother. You had all the eggs that you would ever have while you were still in your mother. So what was going on with her, if you want to look for a causal, but then there is something else that's going on that I think is energetic that we're picking up. So it might not be cause and effect directly that way, but it is interesting to think and to understand that I was inside my mother when she was inside her mother.
Right.
So I was inside my grandmother, in a sense, as a potential, as an egg.
Right. It's really an extraordinary thing. And what interests me as well is to understand what cellular history, I mean, so we could go back 2 generations to when life started, because we clearly are related through those generations.
Exactly.
Energetically.
Exactly.
So we have the starburst, we have the beginning of life physically embodied.
Oh.
And we pass it on.
This, when you say starburst, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, you know, how did life start? And was it a bang? That's what they say, a star bang.
It's so interesting. Because
that resisted and came together in some way.
Today is the 12th of February, 2014, right?
Right.
The reading, because I get Richard Rohr's daily readings, the first line is something to the effect of, the first incarnation is, in materiality, is what we are calling the Big Bang.
Yes. Woo! So, and we are it.
And it's not just humans, and it's not just animals. The whole cosmos is being incarnated. Right. Incarnated.
I love that word, incarnated, and
Yeah.
embodied, and therefore we are related to everything, and we contain everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that we have the history of everything too. So you're talking a little bit about that energy that may tie into understanding the history. That, and I think that contains, the cellular knowledge, the energetic
Absolutely.
knowledge that we embody, that we incarnate.
That's right, Molly.
Yeah. And with it, I think it has a responsibility. We have, I feel much stronger responsibility for the future generations, because they're continuing. I held my grandchildren's eggs in my body with my daughter. Oh my gosh, I want a good world.
I get it. That this is the eco-birth thread. I very much get it. Where you're plump with knowing, and in a healthy way, instead of manipulating or controlling whoever it is that you want to share your knowledge with, you bring your quality of presence and you try to make a safe place, another womb of spirit for relationship to develop. For example, between your children or your husband or whomever. But it's this generativity that is a hallmark of midlife toward elderhood development. Yes, you want to bring it. You want to share what you've learned. And if you've done your work as a conscious embryo adult, you might do it in a healthy way rather than an unhealthy or narcissistic way.
I see.
That's my experience. That's what I'm learning. That's my working growing edge. Yeah.
Well, and it's such a beautiful model, and it's so very real, and it converges everything, to our body, to our heart, and our heart, is so available, and the heart intelligence that we need to be offering, that we need to understand, that this is, I see our body as a commons. It is.
COMM.
COMMONS. So it's the commons. When you think of all that we contain.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the commons. I'm interested in that.
I'm thinking that our body is ours and our individual expression, but it's really, we don't own it. We are possessed by, and it's in public trust. Our children, our compassion, is in common trust. We are really, holding. If we are holding everything, we don't own it. We couldn't own it. This is held in common with everyone else.
I'm understanding that, yes.
And the sacredness and the reverence that is therefore due to the commons is embodied. And then it's also in the world. I mean, we have to revere our earth and our world as commons.
That has been a growing awareness in me as I've grown psychospiritually as a conscious, trying to live as a conscious embryo adult. I guess you get sort of like more of an aerial view of the perspective on things, and the process of trying to just survive and raise your children, or just survive and do whatever it is that you're doing with the first half of your life, sort of gains a global perspective, a more comprehensive or a common perspective. And you do realize how small you are in keeping this process of evolution, unfoldment going. But it's a very huge part, and we're all in it together.
We're all in it together. And it is all sacred. It is all holy, exactly. And it contains the compassion and the comfort that's available, as long as, and by exposing our hearts, we express it. That's how I see it. And I see us, as your model is so beautifully enabling us to understand who we are. Yeah.
We all survived those crises, and we did it before we had a brain. And the heart arises before the brain does, but in service of the developing brain. So it is in us. We are it.
So beautiful.
It's wisdom.
So we have the strength to deal with the crisis and resistance and the beauty of it.
Yep.
Oh, that's lovely, lovely. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your wonderful words for us, for the future generations.
Oh,
And
good.
it's been a wonderful time.